Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander is the show where time traveller nurse Claire is in 18th century France trying to prevent the Jacobite uprising of 1745 with a little help from her 18th century husband Jamie and his best pal Murtaugh. Episode 3, Useful Occupations and Deceptions, does away with a lot of the frippery costumes and schmoozing that was on last week's episode. Instead, it gets right into the nitty-gritty of the plot intrigues and the stresses that this places on our hero couple's relationship. Claire's understandably a wee bit put out when Jamie dashes home, reeking of smoke, booze and cheap perfume, only to rush back out again with little more than a hug, leaving her with nothing much to do but hang out with her pal Louise and the drippy wee Mary Hawkins. The day seems to have brightened up when the wee virgin starts talking nervously about her fear of Frenchmen because of the terrible things they do, and poor Claire's just about to give her a sisterly chat about how sex works, when something Mary says jogs her memory. And it turns out that wee Mary is actually going to end up being the wife of Black Jack Randall and the great-grandma of long-suffering Frank. So Claire storms off home and is just about to take out her annoyance on poor servant Suzette, when it turns out that she's already getting someone else's frustration out, Murtaugh. Needless to say, he's not wholly amused by the intrusion, or by the subsequent strange anger from Claire. Luckily, he's a canny lad and sees that something isn't right, so Claire drops the Black Jack lives bombshell and then decides, because she's a practical lass, to go and get some kind of morning after pill or something for Suzette. And that means a trip back to see her new pal Raymond the chemist. And after an icy happen-by with the Comte de Saint-Germain, they have a wee heart-to-heart about poisons, purging, contraceptives and boredom. Claire, you see, she's been cooped up in the house and she's feeling a bit at loose end and is desperate to do something useful, and Raymond's a helpful guy, so he suggests she goes and does some charity work, looking after sick people at a nearby hospital. So Claire gets right on that, diving straight in, emptying chamber pots and tasting jars of wee. Ugh. Meanwhile, Jamie is busy schooling Duvernay at chess and convinces him to come to the brothel to have an informal chinwag with the bonny prince. All of this seems to be going to plan until when, from nowhere, the prince lets slip that he's actually got most of the cash from the invasion already sorted out from people in England, and he's willing to put up an alliance between Britain and France on the table in exchange for help from the French king in getting the throne. And that puts Jamie's gas right at a beat, and he goes home in a puckle, only to find the house empty. And it's not till nightfall that Claire comes home all happy with tales of tasting disease wee and fiddling with ill folk. Naturally, that gets right on Jim's scope, and they get in a bit of a wee tiff, and both of them have fairly legit complaints, so it ends on a bum note with Jamie doing the typical cross bloke thing of going to the pub, or well, the brothel in this case. But while he's there, he spies a wee pickpocket and chases him down, and then he makes the lad a deal, offering him bed and board in exchange for getting him to rob letters from the prince and his couriers. And all of this leads into them a bit of sleuthing, and they find that most of these letters are actually in code, with one sheet of music and some German writing. And it turns out that the head nun at the hospital speaks German and plays a mean harpsichord, so they get her to play it, and then she recognises that the music is actually a weird reworking of that Bach piece off of like the Hannibal films and TV show. And it turns out that old Johann Bach is a pal of hers, and that looking at the key changes, that gives them the key to solve the code, because the key is the key, just like in that old Whoopi Goldberg film Jumpin' Jack Flash. So then they find out that one of the prince's benefactors is actually the Duke of Sandringham of all people. Yet, coincidences abound in Outlander land. Anyway, Jamie's all sorts of happy about this, but Murtaugh rightly notes that as soon as they put him and Duke Sandy in a room together, the truth about Blackjack will end up coming out. But try as they might, Claire just can't bring herself to tell him the news that she knows might well drive him to do something terrible, or perhaps just break his heart, or his mind completely. So what did I think? Well, this was a totally different beast than last week's episode. It was all about driving forward the Jacobite plot and the intricacies and political movements between the players. I mean, this is the sort of real work from Jamie towards infiltration and subversion of the Jacobite cause, and that's taking its toll. I mean, I love that Sam Heughan really played this brilliantly, as somebody who's not only dog-towered from all his efforts and running a winery at the same time, but also fighting an inward struggle. You see, Jamie's the kind of straight-up sort of fellow. He likes a fair fight and telling the truth and doing everything above board, so all of this underhand chicane seems to clash with his natural view of the world, and it's probably fair to say that ultimately he's not actually wholly adverse to the Jacobite cause, and as a result, maybe he doesn't entirely want to be undermining this spoiled wee prince, even if he does think he's an Egypt. Also, it's clear that the PTSD he's feeling and that the lack of bedtime affection between him and Claire is causing some distance and awkwardness between them, and I thought all of that was done great. I thought they really got that across. I'd also give a shout out to Katrina Balfe, who's doing a great job portraying Claire, who's not only heavily pregnant by this point, but suffering from Jamie's frequent absences and her having to do things like do this ladies at tea sort of stuff that the character of Claire clearly can't be bothered with, and it's driving her to distraction. And that's before she found herself now the friend and confidant of her ex-husband's ancestor, who's going to grow up to be the wife of her most hated enemy. I mean, it's no wonder that she's stressed out and lashing out at people and, Murtaugh and the scullery maid, and that comes across as really genuine. I mean, that's really good. One thing I would say is, though, is having a few pals who've had kids, she's surprisingly well controlled. I mean, you would expect somebody that pregnant to be a bit more irrational and prone to tears, and more on that maybe later. But I'd also like to say I like the work of the supporting cast. The guy playing the prince is still really nice, and he's a bit snivelly, but there's a cunning to him that's becoming more and more apparent, which makes sense, because this guy's supposed to have grown up in the Italian court, so he's going to be really used to intrigues and underhandedness. The guy playing Duvernay, he's still fun and likeable, and of course Dominique Pignon plays Raymond. He's a lovable wee chap, although I'm guessing there's a lot more going on with that character than meets the eye. And I say eye for a reason, because I mean, beyond all the talk of poisons and conning people, that all feels like setup, as does the fact that I noticed something about him that I never realised last week. He's got a great big eye embroidered on his vest. Now, where have we seen that before? That would be in season 1 on Gaius during the big party one in episode 4, because wearing an eye was actually a secret sign at that time that you were a Jacobite sympathiser, and it could be that he's actually better connected in all this than we actually thought. Alternatively, it could be some kind of alchemy symbol, because I read a piece online, which I'll link below, about Terry Dresbach's blog, about how she decided to design this costume, and there's a lot of alchemy stuff, but she never once mentions that eye, even though she mentions absolutely everything else, which I thought was unusual. Of course, the other possibility is that this guy could actually be in league with the Comte de Saint-Germain, because we only actually have Raymond's words that they're enemies. He could actually be his friend, and Raymond could secretly be a bad guy, because, I mean, the Comte was actually there when Claire arrived. So it's all a bit suspect. And I genuinely don't know. I haven't actually read that much of the book. So maybe that could be the case. Maybe not. I could be wrong. I don't want to know. Don't spoil it in the comments or anything. But this is me, and I do have some grumpy opinions this week. Not as many as usual, but I do have some nonetheless. And the first up is to reinforce that some aspects of Claire's pregnancy don't really seem to ring true in my head. I mean, it's paid lip service here and there, but it only seems to be when it suits the script. I mean, Claire makes a point of bemoaning Jim about him smelling bad when he got home at the beginning of the episode, and said that bothered her morning sickness. And yet later in the episode, she's literally smelling and tasting sick people's pee, and it doesn't bother her in the slightest. Now, maybe it's just me, but I felt like, that was a bit unrealistic. And it feels like they should actually make more of the pregnancy. I mean, it usually tends to be quite a big deal in a couple's life. I mean, especially for the first baby. And this season, it's only kind of been used as an occasional thing to point to, and for a way for Claire to sort of pass off a moment where she gets a surprise and going, oh, it's just my pregnancy. But sticking with Claire, she's also putting her neb in all over the shop, and that irritates me. I mean, we see Murtaugh and Suzette doing the dirty, and straight away Claire's off down to the shops to get something from the chemists. I mean, it's a wee bit presumptive, and considering they are in Paris, and apparently contraceptives are de rigueur from what Raymond says, but who's to say also that she isn't potentially wrecking the future by preventing the birth of an important person's ancestor? I mean, I could be being silly there, but maybe Murtaugh and Suzette's, baby, if they had one, would grow up to be Winston Churchill, or Winston Churchill's great-granddad. But anyway, it felt like a poor excuse for her to go and reap Maimon from heart to heart. Especially, as I said, there could have been plenty of reasons given for her to do that, and it felt like that was the only reason they threw that in there. But then again, that situation with her and Raymond was so that she could then meet the nurse at the sick ward, who could then solve the riddle of the music. I mean, it wasn't bad, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is terrible, but this kind of point by point, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, is a bit over coincidental, and it's a wee bit paint by numbers writing. Other than that, I actually liked the episode marvellous well. I thought it was a nice wee better one than the last one. It was all the intrigue and all the spying stuff. I loved that. And then we've got some decent character moments. Although I do feel like Murtaugh is turning into a total hanger-on, which, certainly he feels the same, because they actually brought it up in dialogue with him, saying he had nothing better to do than have a boink with Suzette. But these things are progressing well, and I really can't wait to see what happens next week. So till then, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.